won't even, well, I'll add it to the agenda, but then I'll explain that we're going to sit on. So I don't have to add it to the agenda in 2 weeks, right?
I got
No,
into this
no, it
fantasy
would have to be
baseball,
added
and
to.
I am having
that-
so much fun with it.
So don't even mention it.
So you could say that we're deferring. We'll visit that on 27.
Okay,
We're live.
okay.
Brandon.
Welcome to the Oregon City Council regular meeting. It is June 13th, 2022, and the time now is 7:04. Let's open the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ms. Evans, would you take a roll of council, please?
Mr. Danish? Mr. Drake?
Here.
Mr. Horniak?
Here.
Mrs. Pollock? Mr. Reeves?
Here.
Mr. Wallenczak?
Here.
Mr. Zale?
Here. Council, Mr. Dabish could not be here this evening. He is out of the country on vacation. Can I get a motion to excuse him from tonight's meeting?
So moved, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak.
Second.
Second by Mr. Wallenczak. Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak. Also, Ms. Pauloff is out of the country. She's unable to be here tonight. Can I get a motion to excuse Ms. Pauloff from tonight's meeting?
So moved, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak.
Second.
Second by Mr. Horniak. Thank you, Mr. Horniak. Those two council members will be excused from tonight's meeting. Council, first business for tonight is the approval of the, excuse me, also present at tonight's meeting are Mayor Michael Safarian, City Administrator Michael Beasley, Clerk of Council Tina Evans, Law Director Melissa Pepora, Public Service Director Paul Roman, Chief of Police Brandon Began, Assistant Chief of Police Ryan Spangler, Fire Chief Dennis Hartman, Assistant Fire Chief Mark Mullins. So the first item for tonight business is approval of the meeting minutes for May 23rd, 2022 regular meeting. Can I get a motion?
Mr. President,
Mr. Horniak.
I move to approve the minutes of the May 23rd, 22 regular council meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak.
Second.
Second, Mr. Reeves. Thank you, Mr. Reeves. The minutes for May 23rd regular council meeting have been submitted and approved. Items for, since we had no committee of the whole meeting last week, council, we need to add items 99 through 102 to tonight's meeting. Council, can I get a motion?
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
I moved to add 98's not on, 99 through 102 to tonight's
Thank you,
meeting.
Mr. Reeves. Second by Mr. Horniak. Thank you, Mr. Horniak. So items 99 through 102 have been added to tonight's agenda. Council, item 98, we are not going to discuss this evening. We're putting it off for to the next regular meeting. There's some adjustments we need to make to that. First item will be 99, 2022 submitted or presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and City Administrator Michael Beasley. And I will defer to Mr. Beasley.
Good evening, members on this. If members recall, when we discussed, I think it was last fall, maybe October or September, October, there is a series of opioid settlements that the state and other parties are entering into, some with the distributors, some with the manufacturers, and perhaps at some point with pharmacies as well. This is litigation that the Oregon was not a party to. It was primarily the state of Ohio. It began when Mike DeWine was the Attorney General. The city of Toledo was a party. Lucas County was a party, kind of representing the other local governments. And we just, at the time, it was just not a practical use of our resources to be a party. They've entered into a settlement on the case that we, Oregon, accepted with a resolution ordinance last fall. One of the things that is good about this settlement, though, is even though we weren't a party, local governments are going to get a proportionate share. There was a kind of a significantly complex formula that the state worked out as course of the settlement for deciding two things. There was really two outcomes. There was a proportional distribution of the first tranche of funds, and Oregon's portion of that is going to be about $43,000. This ordinance doesn't have anything to do with that. That was what we enacted back last fall. But those funds will come in anytime now. They're due to come into the city, about $43,000. And it's based on our population, and there's some other formulas, overdose deaths, things like that that are in the formula. Going forward, there will be additional dollars that are coming in. And those dollars are not going to come back to local governments. Those must be used for things like prevention, remediation, community impact, treatment, and things like that. There are two boards that are being created as a result of this, and neither one of them is a governmental board. So it's kind of an unusual piece of litigation. We talked about this back at the time, but just to give the update on it. The first is a statewide board, and the governor had a number of appointments. And then I think, the rest of the state is divided up into districts. Lucas County is its own district. I am the temporary representative for all of Lucas County on that district. As soon as these other boards come into existence, my role there will disappear, and we'll get somebody who deals with this regularly. For our local board, meaning not in Oregon, but countywide for this, what is a district, the county has a number of appointments. The city of Toledo county has 3 appointments. The city of Toledo has 2 appointments. The Township Trustees Association has an appointment, and the cities and villages together make an appointment. The notion is that we would like this board's job will be to apportion dollars downstream that come in for treatment, remediation, or prevention dollars. And the notion was to have someone who has some treatment experience in that. And City Maumee, their administrator had recommended to the cities when we did a couple of Zoom meetings on it, and April Demers, and everyone else, nobody had any better that they wanted to put forward. So this would be the representative of the suburban cities and villages who sits on this board, whose then job will be in the future to apportionment jobs for treatment or prevention. So they're not coming back to local governments. These are dollars that will go to what are the best treatment programs. There'll be a 7-member board that will apportion those in the future. It's not about getting our share. So we are asking each city and village to pass a resolution. And I didn't know Ms. Demers until after Patrick Birch from Maumee had recommended her, and she was really solid. I didn't have a good lengthy Zoom conversation, and she joined in with the other cities on the Zoom call we had last week or whatever. And so we're asking each city and village is going to be looking to put this name forward to serve on this board. We will have a future opportunity if her time is up or she chooses not to serve. This board will kind of be appointing itself in the future. We'll have opportunity on it. There is in the amount of the in the future, we're going to have significant, it could be up to $1 million a year that come into the county from these settlements that are out there. They're going to be going to treatment or prevention. And if there are future settlements with there's litigation and settlements pending with major retailers as well, and that could increase that. So just so folks are aware, it's an opportunity going forward to invest in treatment under there's a lot of dollars that become allocated. If we weren't a party to the litigation, but we benefit from it because we actively engaged with the county, and Melissa and I both engaged in it with them as they kind of helped push our interests. And that's why they included us, all of us in the board, even though we weren't formally parties to the litigation.
Thank you, Mr. Beasley. So I take it this board would be directed to use this money actually through the court system?
Yes.
And when you talk about, you see a large amount of money coming into the county eventually, hopefully.
It will come in.
That would come in and it would probably be distributed according to what the problem is in each area within the county. So
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And with the focus and expectation pursuant to the settlement, that it will be, this dollars will be directed to treatment and prevention. The first tranche of dollars that came into the city, we can use, with very few strings attached. It's easier than CARES Act dollars. But again, we can use it to help pay the cost of the emergency crews that responded, our policing, our Narcan costs are fairly easy. There's some accounting we have to do. We have to set up a special fund, but it's not a significant amount of money to us in terms of a percentage of anything. But for the region, another $1 million a year coming in for the county for prevention and treatment is something that's meaningful. And having an appointee, this is someone who's experienced in the field, they dealt with it they started with like many in the field. She's got her PhD in this field, but with an immediate family member who had a struggle, all right, and dealt with that family impact, and then learned from that and went out, and this is what she does now. So it's good. It's good. I felt good about the representation. I didn't know her until Patrick from Mommy recommended her.
Thank you, Mr. Beasley. Council, any other questions regarding this item?
Mr. President,
Mr. Horniak?
for the administration, more than likely, Mr. Beasley, looking at the organization of the board that's being presented, it looks like the resolution before us is kind of a two-part. Part of it is in supporting the establishment of the board.
Sure.
And then the other part is the individual that we are recommending to appoint.
Right.
I have no question or qualms with Ms. Demers' qualifications or her background. I'm sure she's aptly suited to recommend or to represent the municipalities. My concern or question is with, again, the organization of these boards. 3 representatives from the county commissioners, which I believe that's all 3 county commissioners, 2 representatives from the city of Toledo, and then 1 from all the townships, 1 from all the municipalities. It seems to me that this is the common or a common kind of breakdown of how that goes. And if we are all jointly, I'll say, recipients of the settlement and all trying to combat opioid difficulties within our communities, the voting power on this is very heavily slanted away from the municipalities and the townships to where I don't know that this truly gives Oregon much of a voice. I think this gets back into that 1/7 of 1 vote discussion that we had going back to consolidation. And I don't know that we as a council who were opposed to the consolidation, I have concerns with makeups of governing bodies like this, and I see nothing on here as far as 10-year opportunity for reorganization. So my guess is once this is established, it's established. And there is no term appointments to this. It's whoever these individuals are. Obviously, I'm going to guess the representatives from the city of Toledo may change from time to time, but from the Board of County Commissioners, it's always going to be the 3 commissioners.
Oh, I don't expect it to be always the 3 county commissioners. I expect they'll have appointees,
Okay.
and that they're going to appoint individuals like, we could have appointed our mayor or any mayor of the cities. In general, the goal is to have people involved in this sector. So I expect at the end of the day, there'll be people from the major healthcare systems. There's people from major treatment silos, organizations like Compass. Those ultimately are going to be the representatives more than the elected officials, but they could be either one.
I would say that's the likely assumption. but-
Yeah. I don't actually, I would really be surprised. I don't expect
Sure.
that. In fact, yeah. And as you get down to it, and Councilman, I really I share that worry at some level. This is litigation that we weren't a party to. They went out and did the litigating and spent the money. The city and the county did. We pressed them to make sure that we got to be at the table, even though we didn't do the lifting on the front end.
Mhm.
All right. So, and we felt like that was a victory. All right. And we got the victory in 2 ways. We got a benefit of funding from the settlement, even though we weren't a party. And then ultimately, this board's job is not going to apportion dollars to governments, but to programming across the county. They're gonna look to where's their problem, they want to have dollars there. The commissioner or the county represents all, so Toledo obviously represents Toledo. But I don't expect it to be the county commissioners. This is gonna be individuals who are in this field frequently as they go forward. So it's not like a government administrator's position. I am the statewide representative now, only until like this board comes into existence. We want to have somebody who does this.
Mhm.
I have not, we had to have somebody there to vote so that make sure that our interests as a region were protected, but it's not gonna be people like me typically. It's gonna be people like April Demers. They're gonna be serving these roles, representing it, and they're gonna go on and this board is not a governmental board with any authority over us. This is a board that will provide programming for the county allocation in the future. So I feel like it's as rational. The county has the job of representing all 450,000 residents or whatever our current population is. I didn't think it was though I'm very aware of the challenges associated with these allocations, it is not the kind of board that has governmental authority. This isn't a governmental body.
Mhm.
We because of the way this is starting, we kind of left it up to the communities to inform, to kind of bring this body into existence, and then moving forward, it will be a 501c3 going forward, not a governmental body.
Right, but they are influencing the spend direction of, if we say it's $1 million a year for
That's correct.
several years, they are directing spending of millions of dollars.
That is correct. Absolutely.
On this behalf. Follow-up question to that. So it states in here as a region, Lucas County, Region 4. So is Lucas County its own region, if I understand?
That is correct. So Hamilton County, Franklin County, Summit County, Montgomery County, the largest counties are their own regions. Other communities, it's even more complicated. Sometimes you have 5 counties that make a region, and then they have to come up with a board and representatives. And that's hence, and they all have similar shapes where they're, a whole bunch of cities or a whole bunch, in some cases, several counties are all getting together and figuring out how to do it. And this was where we ended up in our sessions. When we met with the other cities, none of them had a particular problem with this shape. So, we met, and it was us and Maumee and Sylvania and, some of the smaller jurisdictions, and they were comfortable with this shape. Again, because they do have to allocate dollars for it going forward, but probably not much different than the mental health board or the substance abuse and recovery board, that they are allocating dollars now. And this is the only board like that where we actually do have representation. In that sense.
Fair
But
enough. Thank you.
it's a fair concern. In light of the scope of where this came from, I thought we were comfortable with the way it ended up. But it's a fair point. We should always ask that question when there's one of these coming down, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak. Thank you, Mr. Beasley. Council,
Mr.
any other
President.
comments?
Mr. President.
Mr. Wallenczak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Beasley, is there any sunset on this board, or is this board going to be there for the next 30 years, even if monies aren't coming in from the opioid?
Mr. President.
Mr. Beasley.
Yeah, this board and the entity is the creature of the settlement. When the settlement no longer has dollars, they have no more role. They have no role in anything else other than the dollars that come in as a product of the settlement.
Will Lucas County try to continue this board after the funding source from lawsuits and then go to the different communities asking to fund this board?
If some elected official 20 years from now has that as an idea, they could always do it. I'd be surprised, because right now we have a direct voted by the taxpayers allocation that goes through mental health and substance abuse board. Now that's the way that's allocated now. It'd be unusual. It'd be hard to see why they would benefit from it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak. Council, any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I will assign item 99, 2022 as resolution 99, 2022, and ask Ms. Evans to read it into the record.
A resolution supporting the establishment of an endorsement of representative to the One Ohio Recovery Foundation Region 4 Board and declaring an emergency.
Council.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
I move to approve the resolution, what is it, 99 of 2022 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Second by Mr. Drake. Thank you, Mr. Drake. Ms. Evans, would you take a roll call vote of council, please?
Mr. Reeves,
Yes.
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Mr. Horniak,
No.
Mr. Wallenzeck,
No.
Mr. Zale,
Yes. Thank you, council. Resolution 99, 2022 passes with 3 yeas and 2 nays.
I don't think so. I think it needs 4 votes to pass. It needs 4 votes to pass. I think it fails.
Oh, it does need 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, 4 is the quorum. Correct. Correct. I stand corrected.
Mr. President, just.
Go ahead,
just-
Mr.
I just want to add one thing. I don't know if this will change the outcome of if someone was to consider changing their vote, but just as April Mears was suggested to represent the counties and township, I mean, the cities and townships, the county commissioners, as Mr. Beasley said, would likely appoint someone to those positions other than themselves. So if we wanted to put together something and if we could find someone, as Mr. Mears has a pretty impressive resume, and if we have someone in this city who is willing to do that, I found that I have filled many boards, and sometimes it's kind of difficult to find someone that has an impressive resume, but then is willing to take on the role of the position. So there is nothing that would prevent the county commissioners to appoint someone we recommend if we have a quality person. Isn't that correct? Correct. Yeah, so it being, I'm just thinking when I come up to make an appointment to a board or commission or any appointment, we try to find, we're looking for a qualified person. So I believe it would be a serious consideration if we came up with a recommendation that they may consider and likely appoint to that position. I no guarantee of that, but I'm just saying, I know that would be an option of theirs. And if they're thinking any thoughts like I do when I fill them, they'll be looking for qualified people to fill that position other than themselves.
Mr. President,
Mr. Horniak.
if I may, just as a follow-up, and I think, Mayor, to your points, to your questions, I have no objection whatsoever to the appointee being designated, Ms. Demers, as I said.
No, I'm not talking about her. I'm
Right.
talking about if we.
My challenge is, it's a 2-part vote, which is we're voting for a board. And then the second part of that is the representative that's designated. As one item, I am challenged by the organization of the board.
I understand. I understand what you're, I
Yeah,
understand what your
but not
concern
the individual and her qualifications. I have no problem endorsing her as our recommended one, but also as if other communities around here are adopting this as well, being 7 other municipality or 6 other municipalities. I don't know that our yes or no really changes the fact that it's going to happen anyhow.
Mr. President? It
Mr.
doesn't,
Beasley.
what the hope was to have some consensus on it. They may choose to have no representative for cities at all. They don't need to. All right, so that'd be the other path.
Understand?
So, Mr. Beasley, this was our opportunity to have a representative that we wanted,
That's correct. But that's,
that we found was qualified.
that's correct. But
Um,
it is, Steve's points, Councilman, those are all fair
yeah.
points about the shape of it.
Yes,
Those
yes,
are all real.
yes.
The city of Oregon wasn't a party to the litigation.
Understand.
So we're kind of not at the table in that way. So, and we we chose not to be a party just because of the resources. The smaller cities ultimately were in that space. So that's fine.
Okay, council, because the vote was 3 yeas and 2 nays, and 4 are required to pass this resolution, Resolution 99, 2022 has failed. Next item for consideration will be item 100, 2022, which is presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Fire Chief Dennis Hartman, and I will defer to Chief Hartman.
Thank you, Mr. President. As technology goes, everybody knows that technology changes and the older equipment needs to be upgraded. Our current equipment that we have is not capable of, there's some type of security that's coming into the radio system. And our the current mobile radios that we have are not capable of being upgraded to that. And we do have a little bit of time, and we had, you may recall that earlier this year, we upgraded all of our, finished up upgrading all of our portable radios so that we would be ahead of the scale on that. And that's usually, that's what we try to do some every year. But this became a unique opportunity here to get our mobile radios upgraded. And in fact, that Toledo, the city of Toledo, the Toledo Fire, Toledo Police, TARDA, the University of Toledo, are all purchased. They're making a large purchase. Obviously, there is one. It's going to be a very large purchase, and there's because of that, the ability to get a very, very good price came along with it. We were offered it. We got the quotes here, and we find it to be a 45% decrease in cost or bargain, I guess I would say. And we felt that it was that is a good thing. We're basically getting half the radios for free. So the one thing that we do, I need to apologize for, is the resolution that we sent out for you to look at. We noticed, we figured out, you know what, on the first where it says 9 radios, there actually is 16 radios. And that came, if you look at the Motorola Solutions quote, there was 9 of one type radio and 7 of the other, and our administrative assistant mistook that. So it's 16 radios. The price remains exactly the same. We just wanted to correct the number of radios because we're buying 16 radios as opposed to 9. The price is exactly the same. So that's why this corrected ordinance came to you.
Thank you, Chief. Council, are there any questions or comments regarding item 100?
Mr. President.
Mr. Horniak?
Just, I guess, a procedural question more than anything, because the documents I'm looking at still say 9 in the actual item number. Do we need to amend that to 16?
We should, we had.
We've got another, okay, so the actual draw, okay. Okay, thank you, that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak. Council, any other questions or comments? Hearing none, I will assign item 100, 2022 as ordinance 100, 2022, and ask Ms. Evans to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor and finance director to issue a purchase order for the purchase of 16 APX 6500 enhanced 7800 megahertz mobile radios and accessories for the Oregon Fire Division to Motorola Solutions Incorporated, 500 West Monroe Street, Chicago, Illinois, in the amount of $64,904.15 and declaring an emergency. $994.15 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. Council?
Mr. President.
Mr. Wallenczak?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move for passage of ordinance number 100 of 2022 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak.
Second?
Second by Mr. Horniak. Thank you, Mr. Horniak. Ms. Evans, you take a roll call vote of council, please.
Mr. Wallenczak?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes. Thank you, council. Ordinance 100, 2022 passes with 5 yeas and 0 nays. Next item up for discussion is item 101, 2022, which is presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Police Chief Brandon Began, and I will defer to Chief Beek.
Thank you, Mr. President. We're asking for approval from council to replace our TASER tools that we have. They're the ones that we have are starting to fail. The technology that we have or from the Axon company, they're stopping service on, and we want to upgrade to the new TASERs. It is a large expense. It's $182,157.65. That is broken down over a 5-year period, which breaks down to a little over $36,000 per year. It includes all of the TASER units. It includes all the cartridges, replacement cartridges, training tools, everything we'll need over those 5 years, along with the warranty for that 5-year period as well. We think having TASERs are very beneficial. It does reduce injuries to officers. It reduces injuries to suspects. A lot of times with the TASER units, we don't actually have to deploy them. Just having them on our person or activating the light before we deploy them actually reduces the amount of use of force that we have. It's an invaluable tool. We think this new technology that they have will be beneficial to the agency.
Thank you, Chief. Just a quick question. What's different about the technology?
They're upgraded. So they stopped using the old platform, which was the X26 and the X2, which probably you had when you were there. It's the technology itself is upgraded. They have the dual probe units that are on them. And it's just an upgraded version of what we have. It's very similar to what we have, but the upgraded technology and upgraded tool.
Thank you, Chief. Council, any questions or comments regarding item 101? Hearing none, I will sign item 101, 2022 as ordinance 101, 2022, and ask Ms. Evans to read it in the record.
Authorizing the mayor and finance director to issue purchase orders to Exxon Enterprise Incorporated, 17800 North 85th Street, Scottsdale, Arizona, over a 5-year period at an estimated cost of $36,431.53 per year for the purchase of tasers and accessories to be used in the Oregon Police Division and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. Council,
Mr. President.
Mr. Wallentak.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move for passage of item or ordinance number 101 of 2022 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Wallentak.
Second.
Second by Mr. Drake. Thank you, Mr. Drake. Ms. Evans, take a roll call vote to council, please.
Mr. Wallensak?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes, thank you, council. Ordinance 101, 2022 passes with 5 yeas and 0 nays. Next item for consideration tonight, council, is item 102, 2022, which is presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Public Service Director Paul Roman. And I will defer to Mr. Roman.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance is needed just to clarify that the city administrator is authorized or is the authorized representative to sign a low-interest loan document with Ohio EPA. Council recalls earlier in the year, ordinance number 7, 2022, we had an ordinance that went with the original loan application. This is for the wastewater treatment plant, the UV grit removal and safety improvement project. In that ordinance, the administrator was authorized to submit the loan application. But if you read section 2 of that ordinance, and it is attached for reference, that in section 2, just the mayor and the finance director was authorized to enter into any and all loan agreements. Well, we've used this boilerplate language for 20-some years through 6 different loan applications, and it has always been fine to use. But we're 2 weeks away from the loan signing, and this came up last week, and they said either you could resubmit the entire loan application within a day, or could I amend the original ordinance that authorized that? So the amendment is very simple. Just in section 2 of that ordinance, we're adding the city administrator alongside the mayor and finance director to sign any and all agreements for this loan. So it's a simple change. We felt it was the easiest way to clarify it. So
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Mr. Beasley?
Mr. President, just gonna make a note, the loan document package itself is so thick and complex
it
that
is.
it would, Paul would jump off this roof and it's only one story if he had to repackage it.
That was an option.
Because I just said, well, why don't you just resubmit? He says, no, no, no. So just so the members know, it is an extremely complex package that is all set and ready to go. We just want to be able to sign it.
In all reality, that this should, this amendment really should be the true ordinance that's used for future applications as well. That's, it should have read that. It's just, they've allowed it for. a
We've
lot of
always done it
years.
the other way and it was always fine.
So they just saw it and they just thought,
I've signed all
that
the
we
other
should
ones we've
clarify
done,
it.
but they wanted it this way.
Right.
So we said, fine.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Thank you, Mr. Beasley. Council, are there any questions or comments regarding item 102? Hearing none, I will assign item 102, 2022 as ordinance 102, 2022 and ask Ms. Evans to read it into the record.
Amending ordinance 7 of 2022 to further clarify that the city administrator is authorized to enter into any and all agreements accepting funds through the Water Pollution Control Loan Fund and declaring an emergency.
Council,
Mr. President.
Mr. Wallentine.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move for passage of ordinance 102 of 2022 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Wallentine.
Second.
Second by Mr. Horniak. Thank you, Mr. Horniak. Ms. Evans, would you take a roll call vote of council, please?
Mr. Wallentak?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Zale?
Yes, thank you, council. Ordinance 102, 2022 passes with 5 yeas and 0 nays. Council, that concludes the items for consideration this evening. We'll now move to the mayor's report. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President and Council. I have retirement and some appointments to make. I know you've got the correspondence prior to today's meeting. I will start with the retirement from the fire department and ask council's concurrence in the acceptance of the retirement resignation of Ron Hartzell, employee 264, effective June 14th, 2022. As a note, Ron has served at fire station number 43 for 45 years. So we offer congratulations to Ron and thank you for those years. I would once again ask council's concurrence in accepting the desires of Ron Hartzell to retire once again, June 14th, 2022.
Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Wallentak.
you can go with the Horniak.
Mr. Horniak.
I move to concur with the acceptance of the retirement of Ron Hartzell, with our appreciation for 45 years of service.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak.
Second.
Second by Mr. Wallentak. Council, any objections? Hearing none, Mayor, council does concur with accepting the retirement of Ron Hartzell.
And next, we have some seasonal appointments from the rec department. And all of these are going to be effective June 13th, 2022 through April 1st, 2023. And I will name them all and then ask council's concurrence in the acceptance of the appointment of these 3 individuals. Jessica Joyce of 1757 Spring Forest, Oregon, step 1, 1175. Julia Joyce, 1757 Spring Forest, Oregon. I'm guessing they're sisters, and it is 1175 at step 1. Kendall Rivera, 101 Pine View Drive, Oregon, step 1, 1175. Once again, June 13th, 2022, April 1st, 2023. Ask council's concurrence in the appointment of these 3 individuals.
Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
I move to concur with the mayor's appointments of Jessica Joyce, Julia Joyce, and Kendall Rivera as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Second, Mr. Horniak. Thank you, Mr. Horniak. Council, are there any objections? Hearing no objections, Mayor, council does agree with the recommended appointment of those 3 individuals.
And next, a seasonal appointment to the fire department is grounds crew worker 1, step 1. Once again, that is 1175 also. And the appointment is to Mr. Maxwell Alm, 7660 Brown Road, Curtis, Ohio. And so it's crew worker 1, step 1, hourly rate 1175. Effective startup date would be June 8th. I'm guessing he's probably put in some time already. So we are retroing it to June 8th and ask council's concurrence once again. Maxwell Elm to grounds crew worker 1.
Thank you. Council.
Mr. President.
Mr. Wallensack.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move to concur with the mayor of the appointment of Mr. Maxwell Alm to seasonal employment as a grounds crew worker 1.
Thank you, Mr. Wallensack.
Second.
Second by Mr. Reeves. Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, Mayor, the council does agree with the appointment of Maxwell Alms.
And I too thank you. And now we'll move on to the police department, and the position is administrative clerk. And I'd ask council's concurrence in the appointment of Catherine Hill. This appointment would become effective June 21st, 2022. Administrative clerk step 1, which is an annual salary $45,385.60, which is an hourly rate of $21.82 an hour. And once again, I ask council's concurrence. Catherine Hill, June 21st, 2022.
Thank you. Council.
Mr. President.
Mr. Wallensack.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I move to concur with the mayor's appointment of Ms. Catherine Hill to the police records administrative clerk position.
Thank you, Mr. Wallensack. Second by Mr. Horniak. Thank you, Mr. Horniak. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, Mayor, council does agree with the appointment of Catherine Hill.
Thank you, council. And that's it. Just kidding.
Catherine Hill, are you here?
No.
Congratulations.
Welcome aboard.
All right, we have one more. After a little screwing around there, we'll go on to the streets department. And once again, I'd ask council's concurrence in the appointment to Mr. William Shipman, 2121 Lehman Avenue, Toledo, Ohio, to the position of maintenance worker in the Department of Streets. Step 1, hourly rate $27.73 an hour, annual rate of $57,678.40. The appointment will be effective June 27th, 2022. And I'd ask council's concurrence once again to the appointment of Mr. William Shipman.
Council.
Mr. President.
Mr. Horniak.
I move to concur with the mayor with the appointment of William Shipman as maintenance worker. Okay, no stop. On step 1.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak.
Second.
Second by Mr. Reeves. Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, Mayor, council does concur with the appointment of Mr. William Shipman. And
is
William's
here.
here. Congratulations, William.
Congratulations.
Did I get you for a minute? Did I get your attention for a minute? Yes. That would conclude my report.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Beasley.
Mr. President, members, I've got a little lengthier report than usual tonight, just so I ask for your patience, just kind of go through some updates on some things. I've got some good news in a few categories, probably bad news still in one that we've talked about, and kind of a couple of cautionary tales of looking forward, talking about inflation and workforce challenges as we go. First up, on the good news side, revenue continues to be strong for us this year. We did have we knew this is a year that we could be strong. We said when we made our revenue projections that we're given a conservative projection, but as we all know, our revenue goes up and down, not so much with the economy as it does with projects at our major industrial employers. So our revenue is strong. We're probably running about 3.5 million up from where we were last year at this time. But we projected an overall growth. We projected to spend almost $4 million more than we projected to take in. We said at the time that we expected that to be a conservative projection, both on the expenditure side and on the revenue side. So the good news is that it's coming in as well as we hoped as we looked at it. We're probably going to continue. We won't track as well. We've had our best numbers should be reflected in the first part of the year. I'm not going to say at the end of the year we'll be 7 million ahead or 6.8 million ahead. We might be 1 million more ahead for the rest of the year as you go based on the project activity at major employers. And you guys understand our turnarounds in the economy and how those work and drive our revenue as we go. So just that good news is out there. The other good news, we just did our update on healthcare. And in an inflationary time when people are seeing costs go up, Oregon continues to be under where we were. We're even spending less on workforce healthcare with a good, robust plan. We haven't reduced the plan. We've worked on the shape of it. And we're probably spending $500,000 to $600,000 less than we would have spent if we hadn't made some shifts a few years ago. We actually reduced the department charges this year and the workforce charges, the withholding for each member got reduced. And we're so far tracking and we're building up a little reserve in that fund. It is our hope, even in a big inflationary time, that if we're not flat for next year, we're in single digit changes. So we're feeling good about where that nets out for us. Obviously, so many shapes go involved, the ratio of stop loss or reinsurance to other things, catastrophic events for our families, et cetera. But it's so far tracking well. We're probably $500,000 to $600,000 ahead from where we would have been. The other good news continues to be workers' comp. We graded out in the top 5% of Ohio cities that are part of the plan, and we're still saving good dollars every year on that. And that's really nothing to do with me. That's all Sandy who manages that, as you know, and has to deal with that paperwork. For those who, the bureaucracy is still horrible, but we're doing all right on it as you go. The place that is not is less good news, as members know, we're continuing to battle on we had a kind of a, governments like us and private sector folks like us continue to battle cyber attacks. Another large school district in the area got hit. I know of a large private sector firm that ended up with about a $20 million loss on a project, on a thing similar to ours. But Oregon is out about $350,000 to $400,000 so far this year on an attack we had early this year. At the end of the day, we hope that we're out zero when we finish our process and go through our insurance efforts. But that was a spear phishing effort. And to refresh the members, we talked about, we gave you a little heads up on early in the year when it happened. We're continuing to work through the investigation and the insurance claim process. This is a case where pirates might embed themselves in the servers of vendors. And in those cases, they have access to communications between the city and someone and the vendors, and someone will simply send an update and say, hey, Mike, there looks like routine communication between President Zale and Mike Beasley saying, someone in the finance saying, hey, just, for that project, we're going to use these account numbers this cycle. And then we had a staffer in finance change an account number based on a request from a regular vendor, but it wasn't really from the vendor. It was someone posing as the vendor. And in that case, there's no excuse for getting that wrong from our perspective. It was a violation. No employee is allowed to have changed an account number without specifically talking to the vendor, but somebody violated the policy. And we ended up with payments totaling about $850,000 going out the door. We caught the first chunk of that back right away and had an insurance settlement for another $250,000. But there's still $350,000 to $400,000 that is out the door that we're looking to get recovery on. Obviously, we're working with the FBI and going through that process. And we'll keep the council updated. It could well be toward the end of the year before we get final insurance back and forth on it as you go. But there is if policy had been followed, it would not have happened. But we should have better policies if a simple mistake can allow that to go. And so we're continuing to go through that with finance. Finance has changed their practice. I know of other local governments had that exact same thing happen. I know of a local bank that was getting attacked the same way, right? When we do, in fact, they canceled their closings. They said, whatever you do, don't, they canceled their closings because they were having people changing account numbers for them on those things. That said, this is something that we were very aware of. Our department was very aware of. They had discussed, they had anticipated it. They'd caught it in all the other instances where people had attempted it, but in this one they didn't. And it's one of those things that shouldn't have happened. So the department is making changes and they're moving forward. I just want to let council know we're still out 350 plus as they'll go through it, and we're working through the insurance process and hope to have that be zero by the end of the cycle. But it's still a process we're going through. The other cautionary tale I have is on project inflation. And I know every private sector enterprise is dealing with it. Steve, you probably more than anybody else because that's the space you're in on both supply, but whatever. Projects are all costing more. I haven't even gotten into the fuel budget yet, but the projects are all costing more than people budgeted for them for. So council's gonna have to be dealing with this as we go through the end of the year, where we budgeted rationally. Most cases, we budget fairly conservatively. But we're gonna have some projects that are gonna go up in cost as we go, just the way it is. So the bids are coming in higher. We actually had a good one the last cycle that came in, we were very pleased with. Let's just put it that way. This one coming for next.
Yeah.
The wastewater, we're feeling good. We've had some others where we haven't felt as good. And we're really carefully looking at our budget as we go. Kind of a longer term issue that, as I and the baby boomers like me escape, all right? This is a challenge for all employers and government especially because it's harder for us to cut back. We're not as good at it, and the way we deliver services, it's harder. But we're gonna have I shared a little data with the council with the little report that was out. And members know I really get into this data. But we're gonna have 5 to 6 more years in a row where we have more people leaving the workforce than joining it. It takes about 2.1 births per thousand to keep a population stable. In the US, our birth rate is about 1.6 per. All right, and that just math doesn't work. And we have another, once we flush the baby boomers out of the system, it gets reach some equilibrium for a while, then it takes another dip again. But the private sector is making changes by having fewer workers. It's harder for us to do that, but there will be a pressure to do that. In some instances, we're challenging each department head. I've talked to the bargaining unit leadership. I brought this up. We've got to find a way to be aware of this. In some cases, we literally have no applicants for positions, just like the private sector does. So, and we're not like Burger King. We can say, okay, we'll only have drive-through, all right? But that's what they do. But we are, in some cases, do we lower standards or do we have fewer people? Sometimes I don't like either one of those things, but after I'm lost and gone, this council will have to deal with that challenge in the city. Well, we met with cities from across the area a couple weeks ago, and the solution is not all just to cannibalize each other's workforce, where we're going to be asking for more flexibility in allowing that sort of lateral movement, but that's not a solution. All right. So if we hire workers from Northwood and then Sylvania hires workers from here and then Perrysburg hires their workers, all we're doing is spending more money hiring and training, and we haven't solved anything. There are literally not enough people to fill, what is it? Depends on how you count. There's 11.5 or 12 million job vacancies in the United States and 6 million applicants. And it's gonna get worse as more baby boomers retire. And that's just where it is. So we just have to be mindful of that as you go. The other one I just wanted to make a note on is it's just kind of a little thing to be aware of. And I've talked to several of the members of council about it. There was a little boomlet story about Jerusalem Township discussion about policing, and we want Jerusalem Township to be successful. We do emphasize, though, that Oregon police, their primary job is to be the Oregon police. And there is no change in our procedure or practice. even though it seemed like, depending on how you read an article, you could reach that conclusion. That's just not the case. Our police are going to be the Oregon police. We have always backed up other communities when it was possible, and we will continue to do that. But that is only when practical and possible. We really feel for the challenges that Jerusalem Township faces, but they're the same square mileage that Oregon is, and the Bono curve is a long way from the corner of Wheeling and Pickle. And when you have a challenge, so we are just aware of those things. So this is not something that we expect any change on. We just want people to be aware of it. So we'll keep you posted on all those projects, our revenue, I'm back and forth on our insurance and on the financial challenge issue. Workers' comp and healthcare, we're feeling good about, but this project inflation and that's a short-term challenge for us, and that's just math. But the hiring challenge is something we're really going to it's going to be a source of occasional conflict between departments or our bargaining units. How do we deal with the fact that we don't have applicants, and how qualified are they is going to be a challenge for us going forward. And so as after I escape, you guys are going to be dealing with it, but I know every city I talk to and all the private sector employers I talk to are going through the same struggle. So we go. All right. Thanks.
you,
That's
Mr.
longer
Beasley.
than I usually do, but I just wanted to get an update on those things for you since they're.
Thank you, Mr. Beasley. Ms. Purpura.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Purpura. Mr. Roman.
I just wanted to add to Mr. Beasley's comments on inflation. I think the bigger item is just the delivery of products. And so in 2 weeks, I plan to bring in an ordinance to award the project for our wastewater plant, the UV system. But we had a pre-bid meeting, and we found out from all bidders that a transformer that's needed for the UV system has a delivery of 64 weeks. So, and
64 weeks?
64 weeks, so 15 months. And we made it clear to the bidders that we would not hold that, if it's out of their control, we're not going to hold that against them. And I think when we said that, the prices came in a lot lower. So I think how we're combating with these inflation prices is just being a little bit more lenient on the time of completion. That project is not mandated by the EPA, but it's a needed project. But because there's no MPDS permit rule saying you got to do it by this deadline, we can afford to be a little bit more lenient and get the better prices. But we have our road program bid opening tomorrow, and we'll see how that goes. But we did extend our completion date for that as well, and we did that through an addendum. So hopefully we get good prices. So that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Mr. Reeves.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have nothing from my standing committee, but I wanted to touch base a little bit on what Mr. Beasley had said about the article that was in the paper, in the Metro Press. I mean, it sounded like we were thrown under the bus here for coverage. It says, I'm not here to tell about the world ending today, but most of you are not going to see any difference in police service as long as Oregon continues to bail us out. I mean, I am all for the mutual aid. I have no issues whatsoever with that, but we cannot shortchange our citizens by covering Jerusalem Township without being compensated for that. Somehow or some way, maybe we need to have a committee meeting with our police to find out exactly how many calls we are going on compared to leaving our citizens with maybe 1 or 2 or maybe 3 police cars. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we're a little short staffed right now where people are filling in on overtime. And I hate using the term forced overtime, but if we have somebody off and if it's not being covered, then I believe it goes down to the youngest person is forced into some kind of overtime. We can't be shortchanging our citizens with the tax dollars that we are paying, the tax dollars that are coming into our city to go cover Jerusalem Township just for the fact that, the, sheriffs don't want to cover it or are only going to cover it 50% of the time. And you can correct me if I'm wrong also, but I believe Jerusalem Township is in Lucas County. They pay the Lucas County, taxes as well. Couple weeks ago, my, we had a celebration of life for my brother out there at the Jerusalem Fire Hall. There's 3 sheriff cars sitting there on a Saturday afternoon. Not trying to throw people under the bus on the sheriff's department, but every time my wife and I drive down to Oregon Inn, there's one sitting there on, Wynn Road. I don't know, I mean, if they're allowed to take the cars home at night instead of, patrolling, but we should not have to patrol anything out in Jerusalem Township. Like I said, I'm all for the mutual aid. Somehow, some way, this has to get back to the powers that be at Jerusalem Township that we are not going to, cover unless it's a mutual aid situation or, that would be an emergency as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Mr.
Just
Chairman.
question, just a quick question for the chief, if I may. Is the state patrol still taking care of the crashes in Jerusalem Township?
They do take care of the crashes out in Jerusalem Township.
They're still doing that? Okay.
Correct.
And number 2, I think it'd be very simple if you could maybe, for council or for Mr. Reeves or any of us, just it'd be a simple breakdown on calls for service in Jerusalem Township. Are we getting called directly? Or are we backing somebody up? And I think that'd be pretty easy to do.
Yeah. To give a little bit more to it, Sheriff Navarre does have a challenge with covering Jerusalem Township. It's the only township that's out on this side of the county. Currently, we don't go handle any calls for service out there unless we're called to do so. We go assist with emergency calls. We go assist for 2-person calls if there could be some sort of dangerous situation or where they need somebody. That's what we're going for. We plan to continue that. We will not go out and handle non-emergency calls. I believe the article made it sound like we would be. We don't do that currently. We have no plans on doing that. In police work, you staff, 99% of the time you have more than enough staff to handle what you have going on. It's that 1% of the time that something major happens where you have every single crew tied up, and maybe non-emergency calls get pushed back or on delay before we can respond to them. So we have not had any issues with backing up on mutual aid for the county. We've done it in the past for Northwood, other agencies. We've been called out to Perrysburg Township. I mean, wherever, if we have the extra personnel to do so, we'll back people up. We have that mutual aid agreement. We have no problem doing that. We have no problem continuing that. We have no plans of doing any type of non-emergency calls out there. Depending on how you read the article and your interpretation of it, it almost sounds like that's what they're expecting from us. But I don't believe that that's what was meant in that meeting. I don't think that I don't think that's what was meant in that Zoom meeting, and what made it into the press makes it sound a little bit worse than it actually is, in my opinion.
Thank you, Chief. Mayor?
And to address some things Councilman Reeves said is that the township trustees, they do pay their tax. Actually, they don't. There is no funding source for their having police protection. The county was just, sort of doing that at a no charge service for the township. They do not do it for us. We pay for all of our police coverage ourselves. So the township trustees consciously chose not to put a funding source to have police protection out in the township. And just assuming that City of Oregon would pick up the slack, that we say we want to be a good neighbor to them and do what we can when we can just as we have in the past. But calls to assist were calls traditionally from the sheriff's deputies there. And if they're not there to call to assist, I'm not really sure what would happen. I find it, startling to find that the township trustees chose to turn their back on the citizens that are there. So that's where the real blunt of the problem is they chose to turn their back on themselves. It's not us.
Mr. President. Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
thank you. Mr. Mayor, how is the sheriff's department funded then?
Yeah, Mr. Beasley could answer that better than me.
Thank you.
Mr. President, yeah, this does get into a complex area. Yes, there are taxes across the county. For a variety of reasons, there is an array of services, though, that are provided only in townships. The township residents pay no more tax than Oregon residents. So here's what happens to the cities. We pay a county sales tax. The county has no voted property tax for law enforcement. There's an inside millage. So overwhelmingly, the county gets its revenue from its sales tax. But they provide services, many categories of services only in townships. And among those was policing, also included dispatch, also they do maintain all the county roads. There just happen to be no county roads in cities. So that a lot of the license plate fee that goes to help fund the county engineer's office, maybe 70% of that comes from people who live in cities in Lucas County, but 90+% of the work is done only in townships. So state roads, county roads, policing, dispatching, planning, our courts. So for instance, Oregon spends about $1 million, it's about 1.3 million net, maybe a $900,000 cost to operate our court. If you have a business in the township, you have the same access to the court, you just don't have to pay for it. So it's a source of conflict between cities and townships, and it stemmed from a time when the townships were primarily rural. They didn't compete for subdivisions or residents, but some of the largest communities in the county are now townships. So that has been the challenge. Most urban counties, the townships will pay for those services with a separate contract or their own levies. That has not been the way it has gone in Lucas County. So it's a source of conflict. I don't blame the townships, but in some ways, some townships say, move here, we're low tax, because the cities pay for their own services and subsidize theirs. So our residents, if we chose to abolish our police department, the county's not going to come in and be our police. We don't have a choice. We're required to fund the court by the state. But so it's a source of conflict that we all have to be aware of going forward. So there is Springfield Township, who is, I think, the second largest township now, just voted to fund police with a levy. Some communities, so Waterville Township does, Washington Township does, Sylvania Township does, Springfield Township does. And I think Harding Township did vote for a levy of some kind as well. Jerusalem Township has chosen not to. And so that's what's going on.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
thank you. Mr. Beasley, what's the, I know I should know this, what's the approximate size of Jerusalem Township compared
Depends
to
on whether you're
us?
counting water or not. They're about the same size as Oregon is.
29 square miles.
Yeah, and the square miles is about 28 or 9 square miles.
Yes.
Right, Oregon,
We were a township.
yeah, so it depends on what you're counting water or not,
Mhm.
but on the land, they're about the same size we are, roughly. So it's why it's harder to serve in, and as the chief pointed out, it is a geographic oddity. It's one thing to have a car that's going between Harding and Richfield and whatever, there's a group of townships next to each other, they're kind of stuck here on the edge. So it's hard in defense of the Jerusalem Township, it's a challenge for them as well. It's just, it's tough geography, but it's tough policy as well.
Just a follow-up, the reason I'm bringing this up is we cannot, and it sounds like listening to Chief Beegan and what we're talking about here. We cannot shortchange our citizens in Oregon to cover Jerusalem Township. And like I said, I am all for the mutual aid as long as we are not the first responders. And I know there might be times that we might have to be in a dire emergency, just because if the sheriffs are over in Springfield Township, it's gonna take them a heck of a long time to get over here. But I mean, is there any kind of or do we know that if Ottawa County
They have
sheriffs
mutual
in
aid
them,
with them, too.
they have mutual aid with them? Okay, thank you.
And we won't, Terry, just to be, we won't shortchange our citizens. We won't do that.
I took that from what you guys have both said, and according to the chiefs, when I met with them, maybe last week or the week before. I just wanted to bring it out on the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
That's all.
Mr. President, just the final note on, and my apologies for just maybe gilding the lily or pasting something onto it. I think that we've all been in situations where the report in the media ended up, I'm not sure the sheriff said exactly what he wanted to say, but I'm sure the report in the media created a picture that was not the picture he wanted to create. I mean, I'm just, as you go from that, we've all been there.
Well, it sort of put the pressure on us that we were the ones that were covering. I mean, you know, where he said he tried to talk to Oregon to see if they're willing to pick up the slack. I mean, that's, I love our neighbors, but they're not our responsibility.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Mr. Drake.
Okay, Mr. President, I have no report. I agree with what Terry said. I ran into a lot of people that were floored by it, but like the mayor and Mr. Beasley said, that isn't true. And I know I talked to Melissa, and she assured me that it'll just be for mutual aid, just like the sheriff someday. Hopefully not, but if they ever have to mutual aid Oregon, I'm sure they'd be here. Two things, this Friday and Saturday at Oakshade Grove is the Polish picnic. And then there's also a flyer out now. They're gonna have hot rods on the bay. It's gonna be every Thursday starting in June at Dunn Chevy Olds on Dustin Road from 5:30 to 8. So that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. Mr. Wallenczak.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have no report this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenczak. Mr. Horniak.
No report from my standing committee, but I do want to thank kind of the explanation and the points and regarding the coverage of Jerusalem by Oregon Police. And what I would say too, and I think most council members would agree, is I do appreciate the community reach out. After that article ran and contained obviously some, I'll say, leading information that maybe wasn't the direction we were going to, I do appreciate the members of the community that reached out, because there were several that made it a point to call me or find me as that article came out to get a little clarification. And again, Mr. Beasley had reached out and we had chatted about that. So appreciate that. And that's all I have, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak. Council, I have no report from my standing committee. However, next Monday, which is normally a committee of the whole meeting, will be the Juneteenth holiday. So if we do have a committee of the whole meeting, it will be the following Tuesday, June 21st. So make a note of that. That's all I have. Council, can I get, oh, I'm sorry. Yes, we do have two people signed in to speak. Mr. Salander? State your name and address for the record, please.
Yep, Steve Salander, 2435 Eastvale Avenue, Oregon. You took my resolution or the item away, so I don't have any questions about that. You talked about the 911, but actually I do have a couple things with that though, and this may shock you, but I agree with you.
Oh, I know we have a lot of, I don't want to say disagreements, but I agree with a lot of things that you bring up as well.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that, honestly. So I was at the meeting actually where Navarre was there, the sheriff was there over in Jerusalem Township. And what they said was that the average number of calls per day was like 3 was the average. And he did straight up make it sound like we were going to be covering for them. So that's the way it was portrayed there. You know, he was stating, you know, what, since he had experience from being in the Chiefs chair and that he knew Oregon would cover. I mean, it was very much implied or tried to imply. I felt also, and it kind of shocked me at the time hearing that because, you know, we have our own area to cover, you know, and that was actually going to be some of my questions, but you guys pretty much covered all that. But, you know, I didn't expect you either. And I was hoping you were going to be patrolling those areas that, you know, we have the mutual aid like you talked about, which we're going to always follow, of course. But, so he very much did imply that. There's no question at all. So, but I'm glad to hear though that, I mean, you know, our services, as I know many of you also are knowing that, you know, is important as well, that we want to protect our own services here because we do pay tax dollars for them. So I agree with you. Thank you for that. So that was really it. I don't really have any other questions, but just said, like I say, kind of touched on what some of the things you guys had talked about with that. So
Thank you, Mr. Salinger.
that was it. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, I would
sorry.
like to respond.
I
Just
have
to
one
one thing,
question,
when
yeah.
you said, and then you can go on, is just, and I'm not doubting what you were there. I was not, that it, Sheriff Navarre did not make it very clear. But once again, that him speaking for the city of Oregon would be
Right.
like Columbia Gas speaking for Toledo Edison.
Oh, I agree with you.
Yeah,
I know
so-
that's going to shock you too, but I agree with you.
Yeah, right. So that, where I,
You're absolutely right. I've never said
I
that
read
before in my
that,
life,
and I
but
had
Mr.
a
Mayor, you're
big
absolutely right.
First time.
Mark it on the record. Make sure you put it in there. Yeah. I don't think I might have COVID. I'm not sure. I'm just
he was gonna get that recorded, play it in constant.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. No, actually, one question I totally forgot about, but I know it was talked about before on the fireworks, the whole deal with that. I didn't know if maybe I missed it, but were they any updates or anything on that?
President, just a note,
Mr.
we,
Beasley.
the city has until the next meeting to act.
Okay.
It's still being kicked around.
Okay.
Inertia might be that there's not, right now, we haven't seen consensus on something to act on yet.
Okay.
But that's something that we're.
So next regular council meeting, you mean?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Salinger. Mr. Ackerman, state your name and address for the record, please.
Beth Ackerman, 931 Bury Road. Just in the interest of keeping peace with Jerusalem Township, I know several people that have said in Jerusalem Township that they would be more willing to give money to Oregon to help assist them if they needed it than to pay more to the county being their, you know, the irony is, if you've ever spent time on Route 2 like I do with farming and see the coverage, for example, that you guys had for bike weeks, and thank you, because your presence made it so that the traffic was behaved. It seemed we hear sirens going off. You guys had to have a revenue bump from the 2 weeks of bike week. But, you know, we see you guys out there and we appreciate it. And it's keeping us and our equipment safe, slowing everybody down as they come into Oregon. But as someone who's been ticketed by a Lucas County Sheriff's deputy in Jerusalem, if you can imagine that I turned west off of Yandota and managed to get my Ford Club Wagon up to 60 miles an hour in 6 seconds. I want to say Lucas County Sheriff's Department, they managed to police Route 2. They do get out there. As you said, the cars are out there. We do see them. I hope that gets resolved peacefully, and the population imbalance, like you can't hold, it's not apples and apples. Springfield Township's what, like 29,000 or whatever population wise, we're looking at just over 3,000. It's area, I agree, but if they concentrated on just, you know, policing the more populated areas of it, I mean, I would surely understand that. I hope they come to a resolution, but I do know that as an Oregonian, and I don't know anybody that thinks Oregon is going to come to the rescue of anybody in Jerusalem Township without there being an expense to that. I think that was poorly worded by that person. That I doubt Chief Navarre thought that anybody was going to do anything for free, like we're going to be a charity of police protection to, like you said, you guys always do the backups, you'll always assess. But I don't know anybody in Jerusalem Township that thinks it's the responsibility of Oregon to come and police their area. So I just wanted to, if for whatever that's worth, I just wanted to ask.
Beth,
you-
what-
oh,
can
go
I,
ahead.
can I address one thing you said there before you go on to the next thing? And you said that a lot of people that you know from Jerusalem Township would rather see Oregon Patrol than the county sheriff. And that may be true,
For a
but what
price.
they should be, yes, and I understand that they understand for a price, but what they should be doing is similar things that you do. When you don't care for things that you believe might go on here, you come in here and express it. They need to express that desire to their township trustees, because the township trustees chose to not act on that, not want Oregon in for a paid fee, because they consciously made that decision, and that's very accurate. I'm not speaking out of line here.
I can speak on that.
Yeah.
So when we were at the initial meeting, when Sheriff Navarre, it was early last year. We were present. I think it was actually in this room. And he gave the 2-year plan for January 2023, when the patrols would stop out there without payment. It was discussed where Oregon may try to pick up patrols out there. Again, with the citizens of Oregon being our top priority, it's also challenging for us to pick up 28, 29 square miles without adding another person. To add another person, you have to have, average at least 5 hirees to cover it 24 hours a day. That was much higher expense than what the sheriff's office was offering. I think their original offer was 500,000.
But I mean, the township trustees chose to not act on that cost from Oregon.
We did not, we did,
They
From what I'm-
did.
from
I'm
what
just
I'm
telling you,
aware-
they did. They
yeah,
did.
from what I'm aware of, I don't believe that we gave them a price on that, as far as I'm aware.
And they chose not to act on
Well, I know
on that
there's
deal.
a lot of discussion
But
about.
remember, not only is that a area as large as ours, if you take out the city of Oregon's 28.5 square miles, it's somewhat of a square area. Theirs is a long rectangle, so it makes it even worse to cover that long. There's a lot of miles to travel to
Right.
get to one extreme to the other.
Oh, yeah. I
Yeah,
know.
So they come in at a real undesirable
Right. Well,
patrolling.
I
to
did
us.
hear just at the Curtis Kids Day, it was brought to my attention that there are several people that wouldn't mind being annexed into Ottawa County
Mhm.
for Jerusalem Township. So if they're going to be the redheaded stepchild of Lucas County, I think you might want to talk to Ottawa County and see, because if they would like to have Jerusalem Township. So I'm just a thought, being it has been discussed, it's before there would be animosity toward Jerusalem Township.
Well,
I think
well-
you guys should consider.
We'll give Jerusalem Township to Ottawa County.
Well, I mean, it's not up to
If it is-
you, but
that's
I'm
like,
just saying.
once again,
I think
the
that,
Columbia Gas choosing to speak for Toledo Edison.
hey, I'm just letting you know that if they're going to be treated as though they're not worth the bother and they're not citizens of this county,
Mhm.
they just as soon go be citizens of the adjacent county that they feel more, that they relate more to, so.
Yeah.
Because I just want to make a note. The residents of Jerusalem Township get about 40 times the services that the residents of Oregon do from the county. They get a free court, they get free roads, they get the services we don't. That's the way the system works in Ohio.
Sometimes you got to give people what they ask for, right? Let them
So-
find out, right?
So that's the challenge. So the county doesn't provide free police to us. We provide a free court to them. They get the county roads, the state road. The state will take care of Route 2 in Jerusalem Township. Our taxpayers have to take care of it in Oregon.
Well, tell them to go to Port Cline.
So
Give them what they
So
want.
they're getting a lot from the county. They don't pay any more taxes than Oregon residents do to the county, but they get a lot more services. And so
That
that's,
wasn't what I mean, I know that's a big.
it's a long,
that's-
and I don't blame the township for it. It's an
Right.
odd, it's a tough space. So I mean, it's.
They
it's
always
an-
got it. They want.
We're on that fence, kids went to Jerusalem, Eisenhower, we live in Oregon,
It's a
we're,
tough
we're in
issue
the
for
middle
the-
of it.
It's a tough issue.
But what I wanted to ask was, do you have anybody looking, do you have any candidates for your position or Miss Hunter Marks?
We have people inquiring all the time.
Is there anybody?
Just as a note, we
Well,
have,
that's good because you're saying there's nobody running
yes,
for
there will
anything,
be- the city will have plenty of candidates for both positions.
That's good. I mean, you kind of scared me when you're saying that nobody wants to get it, nobody
Certain
wants.
Other positions that we hire and we don't have the applicants we used to have. When we give the civil service test for each department in the city for hirees, we're getting less people apply.
Well, there's a saying in the country, fat dog won't hunt, but I'll let you do with that with what you want. Good evening.
Thank you, Ms. Heckman.
Paul, tell her what it is. Hogs.
No, I'm not gonna say that.
Council, this finishes up all our business for this evening. Can I get a motion for adjournment?
So moved, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Second by Mr. Horniak. Council, any objections? Tonight's meeting is adjourned.
You must have forgot.
Pigs get fat, hogs get fat.
Are we off the air?
I didn't forget.
Be careful.
Let's just make a point on the, it's a tough one on the